section, challenges must be based, this is a key, on personal knowledge, which for these purposes is defined as first-hand knowledge through experience or observation of the facts upon each ground that the challenge is based, and contain any documentation or evidence supporting the facts upon which each ground for the challenge is based. The challenger's signature certifying that all information provided in the form is true and correct, and a clear statement providing that such certification is subject to penalty of perjury. So you have to have first-hand information, which is crazy because let's say that, you've got someone on an anonymous Reddit forum who's saying, hey, I cheated on this or whatever, or I saw this happening at my apartment complex like that. Our apartment manager is just taking ballots and she's got a stack of ballots in her office. Well, that's not firsthand information. And you've got to attest to this under penalty of perjury. And you have to lay out specific firsthand personal knowledge of the potential that a ballot was cast fraudulently. And if you do so without adequate proof, and you challenge a ballot, you could be subject to criminal prosecution. It adds this. Any challenger, so there's two different standards here. This first one, I might agree with. Any challenger who knowingly provides false information as part of a voter registration challenge under this chapter, either before or during an election, is guilty of false swearing, with a fine in the amount fixed by the court and not more than $10,000. Now, I don't necessarily have a huge issue with that. Our elections offices are busy. And if you're just going to have some troll out there like challenging every single person's ballot and knowingly providing false information and then signing a document, that's kind of a different situation. But get this. Any challenger that knowingly challenges a person's voter registration without reasonable cause, either before or during an election, is guilty of a misdemeanor. Each instance where a challenger knowingly makes a challenge without reasonable cause constitutes a separate offense. What the hell is reasonable cause? And who gets to decide what reasonable cause is? I'm guessing that the Democrats' definition of reasonable cause has a much higher burden than what other people's definition of a reasonable cause might be. So now, as someone who might think that there's a suspicion that someone cast a ballot who's not supposed to, or cast a ballot for another individual in their household who maybe died or moved out of state, and you're still getting it. I told you guys, I got a ballot from my brother years after he moved out of state. And I kept calling the Secretary of State, like, why am I getting this ballot? And they kept coming and they kept coming. And I'm an honest person. So of course I tore it apart and I recycled it. But there's a lot of instances where people might have an opportunity to commit fraud. And so if you suspect, well, is it reasonable? If Democrats don't think it's reasonable, you could be guilty of a misdemeanor crime. To me, it's clear. They want to chill people's right to be able to challenge a ballot.